for the ding.
Yeah.
There it is.
Town pump.
I'll call this regular meeting of council, Town of Oliver, Monday, April 12th to order. Are there any late items to add to the agenda, CAO?
No, there are not, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to our consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone would like to be separated out from the consent agenda for discussion? Not hearing any. I look for a mover of the motion that the April 12th, 2021 consent agenda be adopted.
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Adoption of prior minutes. The March 26, 2021 Downtown Advisory Committee minutes for receipt. And there's also a recommendation associated with those minutes that the Downtown Advisory Committee recommend to council that staff investigate the cost of installation of a community clock at the northwest corner of Main Street and Fairview Road. Does anyone want to speak to that? Councilor Bentamili?
I didn't want to speak to it. I just wanted to ask for clarification because I know that we've had this conversation before and I'm still not totally clear. If we pass or adopt the minutes, does that mean that we are adopting the recommendation as well? Or does that mean that we'll discuss the recommendation at some point?
Through the chair, what is being said here is that you're receiving the minutes and you're also endorsing the recommendation. That's what you do with your resolution. So if you want to have your discussion around that particular motion that has been put forward by the Downtown Advisory Committee, you would do that prior to adopting the motion or passing the motion. You do have the opportunity to separate them out if you'd like.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. I was at the Downtown Advisory Committee meeting, and this is something that they've been looking at for a while, to put a clock on the corner of Main Street and Fairview Road next to the Archives building, just as an additional community amenity. They thought it would go well with some of the other things they're doing in the downtown Revite area, and suggested that council could get a sense of the cost for doing something like that. Doesn't mean that we're going to go ahead with it necessarily, but just get a cost. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. Councillor Mattis?
Through to the CAO or whoever else can answer, how much time would be involved in doing this?
I can't answer that question. I wouldn't know.
Okay.
Director, did you have a comment?
Sure, yeah, thank you, Worship. I mean, ultimately, staff wouldn't spend too much time on this. The first thing I'd do is reach out to the person that recommended this, and then from there, members of the committee to spearhead this project. I wouldn't be heavily involved with the research behind this. I would rely on the committee to do that. Volunteers, yeah.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, and further to that, it was discussed in the meeting to reach out to local businesses to see if there maybe be an interest in funding the project as well. And the Grow Oliver coordinator was going to take that on. Thank you.
Councillor Ventimiglia?
Yeah, thank you for the conversation and for the clarification. I would move adoption of prior minutes, including that recommendation. I think we have the Downtown Advisory Committee working hard towards revitalization of downtown and our city center in particular. And if this is something that they've discussed, it sounds like at length, and agree would enhance sort of our civic space downtown, then I don't see why we wouldn't be looking into it.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any further discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, I'll ask the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 2, April 6, 2021, Airport Advisory Committee report for receipt. And there is also a recommendation associated with that the Airport Committee recommend to Council to amend the Oliver Airport 2021 budget to reflect the $48,000 in COVID airport relief grant funds that are to be used for operational expenditures from the province of British Columbia. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know if staff was going to give background, but as the chair of that meeting, what it is similar to the other COVID money that we received from the government. They gave specific funds to airports. Oliver was one of the named airports at $48,000. What the intent here is that the $48,000 can be used for operational expenditures. It's a little bit different than the other COVID funds that can only be used directly for COVID expenses. In this case, it can be used for operational expenditures. So the idea is that we would use the COVID funds first to fund this year's budget, which would then create a surplus, which would go into reserves at the end of the year, either airport reserves or general reserves, depending on the direction of council at that time. So that's the background to the funding. And I guess to finish that up, I would make the motion that is on the table that the April 6, 2021 Airport Advisory Committee minutes be received and that council amend the Oliver Airport 2021 budget to reflect the $48,000 COVID airport relief grant funds that are to be used for operational expenditures from the province of British Columbia.
I'll second.
Moved in second. Councillor Grice, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think there may need to be an amendment to the minutes then, because Councillor Mattis just indicated that he was the chair, but the minutes have Councillor Ventimiglia listed as the chair.
Oh, that was my misspeak. I misspoke.
Oh, okay. Then I withdraw. Never mind. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions or discussion on the motion on the table? Not hearing any, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to committee reports. Can I get a verbal report from Chairperson Grace from the committee of the whole meetings that happened here this evening?
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. We had a few items discussed in the meeting tonight. One was the water utility leak adjustment policy review. So there was a resolution passed that council will amend the water utility leak adjustment policy from a monthly notification to a quarterly notification process. We then were delivered the 2020 annual water report from the Director of Operations, and that report was received for information. And then finally, we had Kathleen Heggie and Anne-Marie Whitaker from EcoPlan International report to us on the age-friendly assessment and action plan. We had 2 resolutions carried. One was that the age-friendly assessment and action plan be received, and the other was that council direct staff to apply for age-friendly BC recognition. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Moving on to water matters. The first item is the water quality summary report for March 2021. I will pass this over to the Director of Operations for some background.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is to provide a summary of the water system operations by the town of Oliver in the month of March. I'll just touch on a few things. March starts becoming very busy at Public Works, especially with the water systems, the rural water systems with maintenance and pump maintenance, getting the canal prepped and cleaned, making sure everything's ready to go for April. And the Black Sage pipe repair, there was a couple of hiccups, but in the end we got it going. It was all repaired, and we did a couple water tests, and everything was cleared and came through okay. And yeah, and then right at the end of March, we finished lining about 340 meters of canal resurfacing just south of the canal diversion at Okanagan River. Temperatures were just above average. Rain was just below average, and there was nothing nothing else that was too crazy about the report. If anybody had any questions, I'll be able to answer them.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Michelle.
Thank you, Your Worship. No real questions, just like to commend Sean for getting the water on time into the canal. I know that there was a lot of, that big capital project, and I'm sure glad they got it in on Friday, because that was the first night of the big frost for the last 3 nights, and came in very handy for a lot of the orchardists. I think if you drove around, you saw a lot of icicles hanging from trees, and it really helps with frost protection. So I'm glad that we didn't delay even by 1 day, because it was -2 on Friday night. So I'd like to move the report, Your Worship. Receipt.
Thank you, Councillor Michelle. Can I get a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Sadhu. Any further questions for the director or discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Anything else to report this evening, Water Councillor Sadhu?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just today's meetings.
Okay, thank you. Anything to report, Water Councillor Michelle?
The same, Your Worship, all the meetings with council today.
Okay, thank you. Moving to development permit variance permits. The first item is development variance permit 6756 Lakeside Drive. I will pass this over to the Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Worship. Are you able to see my slideshow there?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, this application is for development variance permit 2021-06 for 6756 Lakeside Drive. This application is seeking a variance to Section 6 of Subdivision Development Servicing Bylaw 1300, which waives the works and services required for a 2-lot subdivision at 6756 Lakeside Drive. This work includes curb, gutter, sidewalk, storm infrastructure, street lighting, boulevard trees with irrigation, and repaving to the center line of Mountain View Drive. Property location map. The ortho map here, you'll actually see on the screen that the 4 properties to the north have been finished, and that this is the portion that's unfinished, along with the portion of the neighboring property to the south at 6749 Mountain View Drive. The OCP is LR, low density residential. The zoning is RS1, residential low density 1. Bit of background: in September of 2020, a preliminary statement of conditions letter was provided to the property owner from the approving officer for a 2-lot subdivision consisting of an 814 square meter vacant parcel on the west side facing Mountain View Drive, which is vacant, and a 1721 meter squared parcel on the east side fronting Lakeside Drive. And that's the portion that has the existing dwelling on it. Photos of the subject property, you'll see this is the Mountain View Drive frontage of the subject property. Photo on the left shows the west view. As mentioned, the backyard of the current residence and sort of an empty field at this time. And then on the right, it really shows, looking from the south, the portion that's unfinished here, the subject property being the dirt area there, and the neighboring property to the south being the gravel area with rocks. The left shows this is looking from the Game Court intersection north. You'll see the south elevation of the frontage. And then on the right, it shows the north elevation of the Mountain View Drive frontage. Mountain View Drive is considered a minor collector road in the OCP. Typical cross-section in the subdivision development servicing standards includes curb, gutter, and sidewalk on one side with boulevard trees and streetlights. The frontage of this property also falls within the sidewalk corridor illustrated in map B2 of the bylaw. Staff comments. Regarding the variance to waive the required works, the works and services required for the 2015 subdivision that I mentioned earlier, rather, of the 4 neighboring lots to the north included curb, gutter, drainage works, sidewalk, street lighting, boulevard trees with irrigation, plus repaving up to the roadway center line. This is the same standard that's being applied to the subject property as part of this subdivision request. Given that the frontage of the neighboring 6749 would be the last unfinished portion, council may consider either requiring the subdivision applicant to construct an excess and extended services in which a latecomer agreement would be applicable, or the council may consider allocating money in the 2022 budget to complete these works. Town staff have estimated the works and services associated with the subject property frontage to be approximately $35,000, with the other portion along 6749 Mountain View Drive being approximately $30,000. Staff comments continued. Approval of the variance could set a precedent for future developers applying for variances to town standards and subdivision development standards. Ultimately, if the developer is not required to complete the frontage upgrade at this time, then the town can require that it be completed at the time of building permit as per section 6 of the subdivision and development servicing bylaw. This could potentially force the cost on a new property owner or could ultimately fall back on the town to cover these costs. For the reasons listed above, staff recommend denial of the application. Options for council is that council may choose to support, they may choose to deny, or choose not to support rather, or they may choose to refer back to staff. With that, the staff recommendation is that council deny development variance permit 2021-06. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Director. Any questions or comments on this recommendation?
Mayor, sorry to interrupt. I should add that the applicant is here and looks like Mr. Nelson is logged into the system. So if you would like him to speak first, just because we're recommending not to approve it, or Councillor Ventimiglia speak, it's up to you. Thank you.
Well, I'll go to the applicant first.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mr. Nelson.
Okay. I guess my objection to having to put those facilities in place or those features in place is, number one, they've never been there. Our family's owned that property since the 1960s, the early 1960s, when everything was an orchard. Second, it's of little or no value to me to have a sidewalk up there. And third is the neighboring property, they were never required to put one in when that was developed either. So I understand this is all a new feature with a newer OCP, or probably the only OCP. So that's why I'm opposed to putting it in. It just seems onerous, given the fact that I handed that piece of property over to the town. I think it should be the responsibility of the town of Oliver. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. I'll go to Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Worship. I appreciate hearing from the applicant. However, after reading through the staff report and hearing the presentation, I do support the staff recommendation based on the reasons outlined. My question is specifically regarding that portion of road. I know that we've had concerns raised by neighbors in the past about how the newer portion of Mountain View is much wider than the original portion. And being that this is the last property in the newer development that would require sidewalk, curb, etc., I'm wondering if this is in any way, shape, or form an opportunity to begin to remedy that sort of bottleneck issue.
Director?
Thanks. I'd actually like to pass it over to the Director of Operations for his insight on this as well, if that's possible.
Sure.
I may have missed the question.
Oh, that's all right. Sorry. No, I was just referring to if it's a good time to do the whole portion all the way down to Gamay.
Yeah, we thought about that. I mean, if this next portion was done, then maybe we could budget to finish it off or find money in the budget this year. I'm not sure if that's available or not. I know that, and just for the history, like just the carriers that own the property north of Mr. Nelson did have to put in all that infrastructure when they split off the tops of their lots and into those 4 smaller lots. So we're just trying to keep the same, carry the sidewalk through, and eventually, yeah, the town will have to probably pay for that last portion to Gamay Court.
Thank
I
you.
don't
Greg.
know if that answers it.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Ventimiglia?
Sorry, struggle with that mute button sometimes. Sort of, yeah. I guess I was more wondering if this is an opportunity, like, it's kind of a bit off topic, but what the bigger plan is to make the whole road then the same width up until the next intersection, or is there some sort of an opportunity to smooth the sort of harsh, narrow to wide roadway? It sounds like it's a separate process anyway, and something that we'd have to consider.
Through the chair, eventually it would be the same width. So right now it is fairly narrow through that one property. I'm trying to get the address, but it would basically maintain the same width as the rest of Mountain View. That is the newer portion. So it will widen out eventually when we go to do the last section.
I'll go to Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would have to say that I'm in favor of the proposed motion as well, specifically with the comments by the Director of Development Services about setting a precedent, and the fact that the lots on the other side were all required to do that. And when you're subdividing and taking one lot that you live on and turning it into 2 lots, one that you might live on and one that you might sell off, I think that's a reasonable request, is to have that infrastructure finished on the new lot. So I think I'll be voting in favor of the proposed motion. Thank you.
Maybe to continue the discussion, Councillor Schwarzenberger, would you like to make the motion?
I will make the proposed motion.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Moved and second. I will go to Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Ventimiglia is right. It would be the correct time to do it. If this subdivision proceeds, I would ask staff to keep council apprised of that, because it may save both parties money if we were able to complete all of the work as one project instead of 2 separate projects, one for the property owner and one for the town. If it was all done at once, it might be cheaper for both. But be that as it may, we know that this is a bottleneck area. It would not make sense for the town to proceed with doing the final portion without having this portion done as well. And I respect where Mr. Nelson is coming from on this particular issue. But at the same time, this is an area where sidewalks are in place, and it only makes sense for the town to use this opportunity to continue those sidewalks. So I too will be supporting the motion.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Your Worship. A comment and then a question. I do just want to point out that there was quite a lot of written feedback given in opposition to the variance. That being said, the applicant did indicate that there was a neighbor who was not required to put in curb and gutter. So I was wondering if either of the directors could speak to that, just to clarify, please. Thank you.
All right, I'll jump in here. I believe Mr. Nelson was referring to 6756 Lakeside Drive, which has the single family home on it right now. And the reason why they're not required is because they're not proposing to subdivide or substantial redevelopment. So if that time came, then they would be required as well.
Thank you for that clarification.
I guess I'll add my comments here after reading the report, and the discussion has confirmed my feelings that I would also be in support of the motion to deny the development variance permit. I do think this is work that needs to be continued on, and that narrow stretch of road, which is somewhat of a little dangerous area, will be good to get that sorted out. It's been that way for quite a while. Is there any other comments or questions to the directors around this motion? Not hearing any, I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion?
I had a question.
Who is that?
It's Greg Nelson.
I'm not sure. I guess I can let you ask a question.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
I'll go to the CAO on that one, actually, just to make sure we're following procedure. CAO?
No, he had the opportunity to speak in his, with regards to it, but once you've made your decision and you're doing your voting, you cannot take any more questions from the public.
Sorry about that, Mr. Nelson. We'll have to follow our council procedure.
Okay.
I will go back to the question that I was calling. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Not hearing any, the motion is carried. Moving on to item 2, development variance permit 6304 Spartan Street. I will pass this over to the Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Worship. This application is for development variance permit 2020-24 for 6304 Spartan Street. The applicant is seeking a variance to increase the allowable driveway width from 9.1 meters to 18.3 meters as outlined in Building Regulation Bylaw 1140 for 6304 Spartan Street. Property location map, the subject property in yellow, just northwest of Oliver Elementary School. The OCP for the subject property is LR, low density residential, and the zoning is RS1. Photos of the subject property, you'll see this is the front property where the driveway is constructed. Another photo showing the driveway across the entire width of the property. Bit of a background, the approved building plans for the recently constructed dwelling show a 7.1 meter wide driveway. During construction, a concrete driveway was constructed across the entire width of the property for a total width of approximately 18.3 meters. The south portion of the driveway as constructed is also in contravention with subdivision development servicing standards, which require the edge of a driveway to be a minimum of 2 meters from poles, boulevard trees, and other types of infrastructure. The current driveway design also does not allow for proper catchment of stormwater. These are technical standards that will need to be addressed whether or not the variance application is approved. Staff proceeded with enforcement and the applicant indicated that they wish to apply for development variance permit to increase the allowable width of the driveway. Staff comments regarding the variance. Currently, the sewer service runs under the driveway and the water service runs very close to the driveway along the north portion. If these connections require repair, then a portion of the driveway will require to be cut into and repaired, likely at the cost of the town. As constructed, the surface water from the driveway is flowing onto the street with no landscaping to absorb the water. The driveway is not located the required 2 meter distance from the power pole on the south side. The driveway as constructed has a negative impact on the aesthetic values of the street with nose-in parking across the entire width. For the reason listed above, staff recommend denial of the variance. If council chooses to deny the variance, then staff will commence enforcement to require the property owner to modify it to the allowable width of 9.1 meters under the building bylaw. This will also require removal of a portion of the driveway on the south side to ensure it's 2 meters from the power pole, as well as addressing stormwater issues. Options for council are that council may choose to support the recommendation, they may choose not to support the recommendation, or they may choose to refer back to staff for additional information. With that, the staff recommendation is that council deny development variance permit 2020-24. And just as was with the previous application, I believe the applicant is here to speak as well, if you will allow so, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Sure. Does the applicant would like to speak?
Yes, we would like 2 weeks of time to prove that there's many other driveways like ours. And at the time we didn't know about it, but now it's constructed and we need a couple of weeks of time to get approved that to the city. There's other driveways that are similar size.
Okay, thank you. Council will take those comments in consideration as we discuss the matter, and I will go to Councillor Mattis.
Oh, you're muted, Councillor Mattis.
My apologies, just a couple of questions for the director. If we denied this, then it's only the portion that's on the town boulevard that would have to be removed?
Yeah, that's correct. There's not a lot of space from the house to the actual roadway though, so they may not be able to, you know what I mean, make it narrow to the property line and then widen once it's on it.
I understand, but if we went with the regulations, then they would get 9.1 meters across the town boulevard as a driveway, and the rest of it on our property would be removed. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much. You mentioned that if it ever needed to be torn up, that it would be our expense to repair that. Now, again, would that be the portion on the boulevard that you're referring to?
Yeah, that's correct. Where the connection comes off of our main, and then it would run on our property underneath their driveway currently until it hits their property line.
So that okay, I understand that. That certainly answers my questions.
Councillor Bentamila.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just following up on Councillor Mattis's question, I'd just like to make sure that I understand what it is that we are talking about. So I think I just understood from that question that the only portion to be removed if we deny the variance is the portion that encroaches in the boulevard, or that end piece. But when you look at page 8 of 10 of our report and the approved plan, it's only the left-hand side of the driveway up to the porch area. So it was my initial understanding after reading the report that it was the whole right-hand side of the driveway that would have to be removed as well, but maybe I understood that wrong.
Director, are you able to comment on that?
Sorry, I'm not sure I fully understood the question, but I'll just add that. So the approved plans show a 7.1 meter wide driveway, but ultimately they are allowed up to 9.1, so they could keep 9.1. They wouldn't necessarily have to follow this plan, but they would need to keep 2 meters from the existing hydrant on this, or the existing power pole on the south side.
If I may, just for clarification, then the entire width is currently wider than 9.1? There would be some width that would have to be removed as well as length.
The width being the portion along Station Street, yeah, the driveway's been currently constructed almost across the entire width of the property, being 18 meters.
Okay. So I think I understand. My initial understanding was correct, that some width as well as length will need to be removed.
I'll go to Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. At recent comments, council had talked about even reducing the 9 meter number down to a smaller width of 7.5 meters going forward as the expanded as the maximum driveway width. So I can't again, for precedent and other reasons, I can't see allowing a full driveway like this to be there. So I'm going to have to vote in favor of not allowing the variance. Thank you.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to speak through to Councilor Ventimiglia, just to clarify a little bit. The picture that's up on the screen now shows the full pavement right to the edge of the house. The portion of the driveway in that red checked area that is on the private property would remain. It would only be the portion that is on town property that would have to be removed. We don't have regulations as to whether you can pave your yard or not pave your yard. In this case, they would be paving their yard. It's only they drive, the map is incorrect. It's only the boulevard portion that would be removed. So I think our setback, and maybe the director can help me out here, is 6 meters, so, or something like that, off the top of my head. So that would mean that 18 feet out from the house would remain.
Just to add, no, Councillor Mattis is, so each property is given a certain width that they're allowed to enter, nose in on the property and back out of. So they would need to remove the extra width as well, because you can only enter onto your property in a certain part. So if they just remove the portion on town property, then they would still utilize the entire width of the property for a driveway. Are you following what I'm saying?
Oh, I am following, but they could use the driveway and then drive onto that other portion, is what I'm saying. They wouldn't be parked nose in, they wouldn't be crossing the boulevard in that area. They would enter that area from their driveway.
Okay, no, okay, I hear you.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Your Worship. That sort of last exchange has really confused me now. I think it may have muddied the waters a little bit. However, my comment was going to be that I'm not in favor of the variance. We had a building plan that was approved, and I think going against the building plan has caused issues, and to come afterwards to ask for a variance is not the way to go about it. We have our regulations there for a reason. We've ended up covering access to infrastructure, etc. So I would not be in favor. Thank you.
To continue the discussion, Councillor Grace, would you make the recommendation? Move the recommendation recommended by staff.
I will, thank you. If I could have it up on the screen though, please. So I will move that council deny development variance permit 2020-24.
Can I get a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you. I'll take my opportunity to comment on this. My feelings are the same as Councillor Grace. There was a building permit pulled that clearly showed the driveway and what was allowed there. It was not built as what was approved, and to me that's pretty clear. Building something different and then asking for a variance is not the way to go about work, in my opinion. And I would be in support of council denying the development variance permit. Councillor Ventimiglia?
Yeah, I agree with those comments, and I agree with the troublesome issue of building over town infrastructure and too close to power poles and all that sort of thing. But I honestly am still unclear as to what we're asking the applicant to do, especially after that last exchange. So if I understand according to Councillor Mattis, all we're asking them to do is remove some of the pavement close to the boulevard, because they have every right to pave their front yard if they so choose. And if I understand from the director of planning, that's not the case, that they're only allowed to have a driveway up to a certain portion. So I personally would really like clarification, and I'm sure the applicant would as well.
Director, are you able to help out here?
Sure. Yeah, no, I would say that Councillor Mattis is correct in that it's, they could pave their front yard. I'll just bring it back up on my screen here, just so I can sort of illustrate what I'm referring to here. Are you able to see my mouse on the screen here?
I was, but I can't right now.
which, okay. Is it up? Oh, it shows the staff recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna go back and you can see my mouse here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what Councillor Mattis is referring to is that technically it's the crossover part that's limited in width. So they could come in here and turn, oh no, I clicked my mouse. They could come in here and park there and then back out. They could do this. You see where my mouse is going? What they can't do is nose in across the entire width of the property, but technically there's nothing stopping them from driving through the width that's allowed and then parking in the front there. I think that's what Councillor Mattis is referring to.
Yeah, I don't want to jump in here, Director, but I think your mouse is going in the wrong direction. It's from the red is to be removed.
The red
No.
is a portion
Other way-
in front of the
I
existing
have it
garage.
backwards. The red remains and the rest is removed.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the red just shows the approved driveway.
Okay, my apologies.
Follow up, Councillor Ventimiglia.
Yeah, so then just regarding the, was it 9 meters that was mentioned for driveway width? What happens to that?
So likely to be compliant with the bylaw, they would need to remove the portion of the driveway that is close to the power pole here at the south side. So they need to remove this portion here. And then they would need to remove the portion along the boulevard here so that the red crosshatched area is 9 meters wide. If that makes sense. So their driveway would go from basically here to sort of somewhere in this point here. And then they could come in their property and park. So they would need to remove a portion of the existing driveway where I'm sort of circling my mouse here. And then along the south end adjacent to the pole. I don't know if I would like to refer maybe to the Director of Operations if he has any insight beyond what I'm sharing at this time.
Randy, I think showing the picture of the homes is easier for some people. There you go. So the left side where the garage is, it will be staying. A portion close to the pole, like Randy mentioned, will have to come out, small portion. But the driveway to where the front steps are, that could be increased by a couple of meters. And then I think Randy had initially wanted the rest of the concrete out, but right now it sounds like it's just the concrete on the boulevard. Is that what we're getting at now?
That's
but
correct.
What's stopping the property owner from pulling in the way they are right now? If you put down some small landscaping or gravel, it wouldn't be any different than it is now.
I know, and that's the difficulty around it.
I'll just ask one question. You also mentioned dealing with stormwater as well. So if you don't have that concrete there, you would have an ability to deal with some stormwater before it got to the road. Is that correct, Director?
Which director?
I'll answer it. Right now, we don't have a lot of storm retention in that area. Close to the school, anytime we have curb and gutter, then we can capture the storm. Otherwise, the roads crossfall or crown and the water goes into the boulevard and recedes into the gravels and grasses.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question was going to be on stormwater retention as well, but perhaps we have to relook at the building bylaw yet again for this type of thing, because I really don't think that even when a little bit of pavement is taken out where the boulevard is, the homeowner can put down some gravel and still front in 4 or 5 vehicles wide, which is what we're trying to get away from. So I'm still opposed, and I think there's a loophole that we've got to close in the building bylaw. Thank you.
Councillor Grice.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I also have concerns about an evident loophole that we've left open here, because part of the reason that we have a specific width allotment for a driveway is for safety purposes, so that if you're following someone and they're turning, you know where they're going to turn when they're parking. And so as a procedural matter, I'm wondering if we want to perhaps defer this motion until we've revisited the bylaw, or if this would be grandfathered in. I'm not sure how that's going to work. Maybe I'd ask the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, it could possibly delaying a request for a variance to fix a bylaw. It wouldn't help. It would make it so that they could be grandfathered in. What you need to do is deal with this now, and if the direction is to deny the variance, then some remediation will have to be done in order to ensure that parking does not happen, that they can't pull in that way in that piece of property. And I'm not sure exactly what could happen with regards to that, whether I don't believe there's any curbing along that street at this point in time. So that's about the only way. It's a rollover curb, is it not, in that area? No, no curb, nothing, no curbs.
No curbs.
No curbs. So it's just a matter of then enforcing the bylaw to ensure that people don't park that way.
Okay, I have lots of comments, but I'm going to leave them. So thank you.
It's a very tricky situation that we have here.
Director, Development Services, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. No, I just wanted to add that currently our traffic bylaw, section 12G, does state that no person shall park either or other than parallel to the edge of the roadway. So you are allowed to park nose in your driveway, and if you're parked nose in on the rest of your property that's not your driveway, then technically that would be infraction with our, that would be in violation with our traffic bylaw, and we could enforce it at that point.
Councillor Schwarzenberger, is that a hand still up?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you for that, Director Houle. That alleviates some of my concerns, but can I ask, obviously the building permit allowed for a 7-meter driveway, and that's not what was constructed. So is there any remedy or penalty for not completing your building as permitted?
Director, Development Services?
Sure, it's a tricky one because it's not the building, it's the driveway. So technically they are in violation of the plans. So that is something that we could enforce for sure. But it does make it a little bit more difficult when it's not the building, and it's a driveway.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for all the clarification from everyone. I think by removing some of that driveway, that it will alleviate the rainwater issues that we may have. I really appreciate the director's comment regarding the nose-in parking, and that we do have bylaws in place to eliminate that loophole, as it was referred to. It's not really a loophole. It is covered by our bylaws. If the town chooses to enforce what was permitted under the building permit, then it would simply be a case of, in this case, of the homeowner taking out another building permit at another cost for the extra 2 meters that were not on the plan that is allowed within the bylaw. I think it would be more beneficial for the town to just say it meets our bylaw. Regardless of what you built, it meets our bylaws. Building plans change all the time, as the director knows. And I don't think it would be reasonable to say, no, you have to take it all out and then get another permit to add in another 1.5 meters or whatever the case may be, especially when it currently meets the bylaw.
Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think loophole is a good word because we're not talking about just an extra meter or two. We're talking about basically nearly double the width of what's allowed. I think personally, I'm all for parking on your own property. If you drive up the street from me, sometimes you can barely get around because of all of the cars that are parked, along the roadway, half on their grass, half on the road, because there's not enough parking for the amount of people that live in the home. However, for the reasons that we've discussed, this one just wasn't done properly. I guess I'm still really struggling with this sort of ambiguous remediation. What I understood at the beginning and what I think the director was trying to get across to us, what I understood from the report was one thing, and what we're talking about now is something different. And if that's the solution, then that's the solution. But we're basically then allowing a driveway well beyond the 9 meters wide and just trying to control sort of entry and exit in a way that's different to what's being done right now. So if that's the goal, we could require a bit of landscaping along that remaining, 8 meters or whatever it is. I don't have the plan in front of me. To make sure that people aren't pulling nose in. But I think that it's an issue when we're struggling this much just to understand what it is that we're actually trying to require somebody to do.
I'll just add my comments one more time to this. To me, this is, I don't know, I think we're getting into the weeds on this too much. To me, a building permit was pulled. This is what you were authorized to do. You went and did something else, and now you want a variance. The solution is really going to be between the building owner and the Director of Development Services to figure out what is available within the current bylaws and what they can build there and what they can't. I don't think we need to worry about that. To me, this is a very simple question. You built what you weren't allowed to build, and now you want a variance. Question is, are we going to allow it or not? And for me, it's very simple. The answer is no. Those are my comments. Any more comments, discussion on this motion? I'm not seeing any. I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 3, development permit 6422 Main Street. I'll pass this over to the Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Worship. This one should be more fun. I just have to share my screen here. All right, this application is development permit 2021-09 for 6422 Main Street. The applicant is proposing to construct a 2,777 square foot, 60-seat Dairy Queen restaurant with an adjacent 1,900 square foot retail space and 4 two-bedroom dwelling units on the second floor. The subject property is located within the town center development permit area of the OCP and requires approval for the form and character and to address landscaping requirements. Property location map is located on the north portion of Main Street, adjacent to Veterans Ave and on Main. The ortho map here shows the existing empty parcel at this time. The OCP for the site is town center, and the zoning is also town center. Photos of the subject property. This is the Main Street elevation. This is the elevation looking from the corner of Main Street and Veterans, which shows the subject property. This is looking from the northwest corner, shows the lane on the right. On the left is the north property line in which a new fence will be built. And on the right shows the existing lane condition in which paving will be required. On the left is the existing frontage along Veterans Ave, where it shows where there's new sidewalk required. On the right also shows the existing frontage along Veterans Ave. The left shows the existing frontage along Main Street, where new sidewalk and driveway closure is required. On the right shows the existing under-maintained, I guess, landscaping, and this portion will actually be removed, and then the sidewalk will cover the entire width. This slide shows the site plan. Outlined in red is the footprint of the proposed building. And then on the northwest corner, this is a proposed cover for the cars. You'll see access to the site is from Veterans Ave. You pull into here, and then you can either decide to go into the drive-through, or you can park in the parking lot there. And then the residences use the laneway in the back and park in the northwest corner. Building elevations. On the left, it shows the proposed Dairy Queen. On the right as well, with the residential units on the second floor, and these are the decks facing Main Street. This is a good elevation that shows the entire front. You'll see that the left portion of the bottom floor is the Dairy Queen with a approximate 10-foot breezeway, and then a new 2,000 square foot commercial space on the north side, with the 4 two-bedroom dwelling units covering the entire top floor, each with their own outdoor deck. This shows the retail space and the drive-through area on the back. This is the northwest corner that shows the parking area with bicycle parking here. And this is the loading space in front of the yellow bullards. The landscape plan features a lot of quality landscaping with some new trees, grass, and different plant species. The main floor plan shows the Dairy Queen as previously discussed with the breezeway and the future retail. The second floor, 4 equally sized, approximately 1,000 square foot or just under 2-bedroom units, each with their own outdoor deck. The proposed development meets the intent of the town center DP area as highlighted below. The 2 floors are at a 0 setback from the sidewalk along Main Street with an outdoor eating area and pergola adjacent to the corner. The main entries into the commercial spaces are recessed along with residential decks on the second floor, which add character to the building. The corner of the building is the focal point with a variation of architecture, including multiple material types and large windows. The facade is varied with multiple colors and multiple material types, with various trims and accents. Each residential unit has a private deck. The parking areas are located behind the building with access from a side street rather than Main Street. Bicycle parking facilities are provided for the residences in the form of an outdoor secured storage structure behind the building in close proximity to the parking area. The landscape plan features multiple species of trees and shrubs, which will improve the aesthetic value of the development. And the building will meet step 3 of the BC Energy Step Code. Options for council is that council may choose to support the recommendation, may choose not to support the recommendation, or may choose to refer back to staff for additional information. The staff recommendation is that council approve development permit 2021-09 and that staff be directed to issue the permit. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Director. Questions, comments for the Director? Councillor Mattis?
Muted.
You're muted, Councillor Mattis.
My apologies. Do we have any indication on timeframes for construction?
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, no, they're motivated to start right away. So once they get approval for this, they'll get their building permit plans in probably by the end of the month and hopefully start construction in June.
Is it something that they would be able to and hope to finish this year?
Are you
Like-
on to ice cream?
No, I'm thinking more in terms of the laneway in behind. Again, much the same as the variance permit we talked about with, there might be an opportune time for the town to continue the curb and sidewalk there. It may be an opportune time for us to continue paving the rest of that alley, considering that this is half the block. So I'm just looking at other opportunities, and I was only asking the question in terms of the budget cycle, whether it would fall this year or next year.
Just to answer that, likely it won't be ready until next spring or summer. So they wouldn't do the offsite works, I presume, until after the building's constructed. So they would do these improvements probably next spring.
Okay, so I guess I'm asking staff to make a note somewhere to give that consideration in next year's budget to finish that laneway. And yes, I do want ice cream.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I must say I'm really looking forward to this project. I think in the last year, the question I've been asked most by residents is, when's the Dairy Queen going to get built? So I think this is great news, and I look forward to getting an ice cream as well. So thank you.
Would you like to make the motion, Councillor Schwarzenberger?
I would love to make the motion that council approve development permit number 2021-09 and that staff be directed to issue the permit.
I'll second.
Seconded, Councillor Grice, and I'll go to Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question for clarification. And I agree with Councillor Schwarzenberger on the comment that this is probably the most questioned item in town over the last year, including by my own family. I'm just trying to figure out where the garbage cans are. Page 16 shows them, I think, off in the distance, sort of a corner view of the building, in which case they then exist in the parking lot, back corner of the parking lot behind the proposed retail. I just want to make sure that I'm reading that correctly.
Through the chair, the garbage and recycling facilities are located in the northwest corner, and the applicants have advised that that is the garbage for the entire site. So staff did raise some concerns about, is this the garbage for the residences and the commercial space? And they indicated that that is their plan. So you'll see it along the northwest corner, sort of along the neighbor's fence there.
Okay, that's what I thought then. So just in the rendering that we have, it just kind of shows it off in the distance behind multiple lanes of traffic and parking.
Director, that was it. Anything else, Councillor Ventimiglia? Nope. Any other comments, questions? Not hearing any, I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to bylaws, we have the zoning amendment bylaw 1380.16. That's a housekeeping amendments for adoption. Proposed motion is that council adopt the zoning amendment bylaw 1380.16 housekeeping amendments. Can I have a mover of that motion?
So moved.
So moved. Seconder, please.
Second.
Second. Any questions or comments on the motion?
I would just comment that based on what we've seen tonight, that this is an ongoing, continuous project for the director.
Okay. I would agree. Not seeing anything further, I will call a question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to business, transfer of lease, Tanya Lindley to Marcel LeBlanc Real Estate Incorporated. I will pass it over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report before council is to seek consent to assign hangar number 2 that's located in the 3-bay hangar from Tanya Lindley to a new party. Following, as in the background, as you know, the airport has a number of hangars on the site for which the town leases the land to individual tenants. Miss Lindley is selling hangar number 2 in the 3-bay to Marcel LeBlanc Real Estate Inc. And to finalize this transaction, the lease needs to be transferred into a new owner's name. And we're bringing it to council because in the lease, it indicates that the tenant, the hangar owner, shall not assign its leasehold interest under this lease and shall not mortgage or otherwise encumber its leasehold interest under this lease without prior written consent of the landlord, which is the town. The terms and conditions of the lease remain the same, except for the term. It'll be amended to a 22-year term from April 2021 to May 15, 2043. So the resolution before council is that council consents to assigning the Tanya Lindley 3-bay hangar number 2 lease to Marcel LeBlanc Real Estate Inc. with all the terms and conditions of the lease remaining the same, except for the term of the lease shall be reduced to 22 years from April 2021 to May 15, 2043, and that council authorizes the signing authorities to execute the lease agreement as presented in the corporate officer's report presented April 12th, 2021. And I could take any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
Any questions for the corporate officer?
I'll move the proposed motion.
Thank you, Councilor Grace. Seconder.
Seconded.
Any further comments, discussion? Not hearing any, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 2, joint grant with RDOS, Emergency Operations Centers and Training. Again, I'll pass this over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report before council is to seek your authorization to pursue a regional grant for emergency operations centers in training to support regional training and undertake a virtual EOC needs assessment. The regional district is submitting the grant through UBCM under the emergency operations and training sector. The funding stream is to support the purchase of equipment and supplies required to maintain or improve EOCs or enhance capacity. The total project cost that the RDOS is submitting is $204,300 or $204,300, with the total grant request for being $133,800. A lot of the costs are directed to in-kind, staff time, and facility use. For the town of Oliver, a part of the grant request is to access the regional public notification system. The use of the notification system will enhance communication capability with residents during an emergency. There is a financial component identified at $1,000, and that would be to promote the Civic Ready app. And I believe that primarily those costs will be staff time to promote through our social media feeds and general advertising. And I could take any questions.
Any questions for the corporate officer?
Would you like me to read the proposed motion, Mayor Johansson?
Yes, please, corporate officer.
Thank you. That the town of Oliver participate in a joint grant application with the RDOS to the UBCM Emergency Operations Centers and Training Program, and that council supports the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen to apply for, receive, and maintain grant funding on the town of Oliver's behalf for emergency centers and training.
Moved as read.
Moved. A seconder.
Second.
Any further discussion or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to correspondence, I'll pass this over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. For the correspondence report for April 12th, there's one item for information only, and that's an email dated March 31st, 2021 from the Liquor Cannabis Regulation Branch regarding temporary expanded service areas, applications with prioritization for patio approvals. And the proposed motion is that the correspondence listed in N1 and the weekly mail be received.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Any further comment, discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to councillor reports, I'll go to Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Your Worship. On Tuesday, March 23rd, I attended CAO interviews with the rest of council. Monday, March 29th, a special closed and some more interviews. Wednesday, March the 31st, PCN Clinic Advisory Committee meeting, and those are led by the Divisions of Family Practice. Thursday, April the 1st, Spirit of Oliver Selection Committee meeting. Tuesday, April the 6th, I chaired the Airport Advisory Committee meeting. Wednesday, April the 7th, at the invitation of Mayor Johansson, met with himself and Dr. Alan Ruddiman and Dr. Dave Shaw regarding recruitment and retention in our community. Friday, April the 9th, I attended a proposed National Park Reserve municipal update meeting. And the update is basically as things are still ticking along, moving slower than hoped or anticipated due to COVID this year and just the restrictions on meetings and meeting online. But things are continuing to move forward, and meetings are happening regularly with regional district area reps regarding specific resident concerns in the proposed National Park Reserve boundary. And then today's CAO interviews and council meetings. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Councillor Ventimiglia. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Attended 3 separate CAO recruitment meetings, including one for most of today, earlier today. Friday, March 26th, I chaired the Downtown Advisory Committee meeting. And Tuesday, April 6th, I attended the Oliver Tourism meeting. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. Councillor Grice.
Sorry. Oh, we are, okay. Switching screens and muting. I think we got there now. Tuesday, March 23rd was CAO interviews with the rest of council. Wednesday, March 24th was a SILGA speaker series on being prepared for unexpected change. Friday, March 26th, I also attended the Downtown Advisory Committee meeting. We had a Grow Oliver update. I gave a report on attracting young families to Oliver, and we had the discussion of the town clock, which came up earlier in today's meeting. Later on March 26th, I had a SILGA Resolutions Committee meeting. Monday, March 29th, were CAO interviews with the rest of council. Wednesday, March 31st, I had a chat with Larry Olson, who has the longest title I've ever heard, regional manager at South Okanagan Kootenai. He's an economic development guy. Anyway, so I chatted with him about my attracting young families to Oliver plan. So there'll be more coming from that. Wednesday, March 31st was the SILGA Speaker Series presentation again from the Honorable Ravi Kalhan, Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation. So it's interesting to hear what he had to say. Another SILGA Speaker Series, April 7th, on the role of universities in regional recovery with the President of Thompson Rivers University. And today's 9 meetings, and that is the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. All of the council meetings that have been listed by everyone else, and the Airport Advisory Committee on April 6th.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. For myself, March 23rd, CAO interviews. March 24th, the Oliver Clinic Advisory Committee hosted by Divisions. March 25th was the Mayor's Vaccine Roundtable. March 29th, CAO interviews. March 31st, Oliver Clinic Advisory Committee, again hosted by Divisions. April 1st, RDOS and the Mayor's Vaccine Roundtable. April 7th, the virtual meeting with Dr. Ritteman and Dr. Shaw about physician recruitment in Oliver Asuyas. April 9th, National Park Reserve update, and April 12th, some additional CAO interviews in addition to the meetings this evening. Our next upcoming meeting is April 26, 2021. That's our regular open meeting. Acting Mayor schedule for April and May is Councillor Mattis. Before we look to adjourn, we have public question period. And if there's anyone that would like a question about anything regarding any matters discussed during the current meeting, I'm willing to listen. CAO?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to recognize the town of Oliver for getting their award at Silga
All right.
for the social responsibility and the statue that we have down at Bridge Park.
Yes, very happy and honored to get that award from Silga. That's the second one we've had in this term of council. So good job. Again, I'll ask one more time if anybody would like to ask a question of council on any matters discussed this evening. I'm not seeing anyone with their hand up. Are you, Diane?
No, I'm not, Mayor. I did allow them to talk, but
Okay, well, then I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved, second.
Second.
Call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you, council. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.